Okay, good evening and welcome to the January 22nd Council work session. And we have one Councilor Evans. Greg is on the phone, so there are 5 councilors here. And I just want to open this up in the beginning for any committee reports or items from interest. I do have one. Does anyone else have something they want to?
Yeah, briefly.
Betty, why don't you go for it? And Emily? Okay.
And I've got something.
And you've got something, Claire? Okay. Go for it.
Thank you. The Edison parking lot, can we do anything about that? Getting lots of email from people who don't want the playground taken over for a parking lot.
Yes, our intent would be to come to the council sometime in the next several weeks and give you some options on what you can do with that if you choose to. So yes, you can, and we'll be coming to the council.
Okay, thanks. I think we should do something if we can.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing about parking downtown, several people have told me they won't be coming downtown anymore because there's no more free parking. And other people have complained that because there's no free parking on the streets, the parking garages are getting overfilled. It's hard to get into them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Emily.
Thank you. Also about the parking meters, they're really pretty. They look nice. I'm noticing a lot more empty spaces. We had talked briefly about possibly making some of them 3 hours, and I'd really, really like that. Sometimes you have an hour and a half meeting, it runs over, or, you know, a 2-hour movie, and you're just like, ah. So I think it would be really cool if some of them were 3 hours. And last year, somebody suggested to me, what if we made the first 15 minutes free? You just could whip into a store and whip out, and you wouldn't need to pay. And if you were staying for 2 hours, you'd get that free 15 minutes. Just maybe as a feel good, because, you know, you get an hour at the parking garage. You can park for 3 hours at 5th Street. So that might give us some advantages in getting people to come down. Sustainability Commission met this week, and we had a really good presentation on recycling, plastics recycling. They're changing because they're contaminated. China has their own recycling to recycle, especially plastics. The county is more restricted. We can still do milk jugs and bottles, but the Tetra Paks, no more. So keep an eye about that. It's going to change things. The Human Rights Commission also met this week, and together both the Human Rights Commission and Sustainability Commission have endorsed supporting a declaration on human rights and climate change. We're going to bring this to the February 12th meeting for support. It was brought to us by Beyond Toxics and is supported by them, the commissions, the NAACP, and we're making outreach to the U of O and LCC. We'd be the second city to endorse it in the entire world. Yachats was first. And there's, you know, longer stories. But anyway, it's really exciting, and it really complements our climate action plan. And non-binding, no financial interest, but really addresses the things we're about. It's been many years in the making, and I'm excited about that. And both of my commissions want it, so there. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire?
Thank you. So I've had all three of my appointment committees meet. So Police Commission, we met last week, and Director James gave us a new look at data related to calls for service and how we're doing in terms of coverage of the city. It was very illuminating, and I'm looking forward to the discussion that should ensue from this different look at the data. The Human Services Commission met today, and we lacked a quorum for many reasons, and one of the contributing reasons is we are still awaiting a new budget committee appointee to serve on the Human Services Commission. So I'm making a very public request for staff to assist us in figuring that out. I know the budget committee will meet at the beginning of March to select officers, and perhaps it can wait till then. We've waited a number of months, but that is an important role for a budget committee member, and I hope we can have someone serving in that soon. And lastly, the Lane Area Commission on Transportation met last week, and I have been selected to serve as vice chair of the Lane Area Commission on Transportation. So that's a privilege, a little more work, and looking forward to that as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Greg, did you have any items of interest?
No, not at this time, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Alan, we're just doing items of interest. Do you have anything? Okay. So I will just jump in that I missed your meeting last week because I went on the United Front trip with our colleagues from the county, from Springfield, from Lane Transit District, the Lama Lane Parks and Rec, and the Springfield Schools to Washington, D.C. And we'll just say there were 18 of us. We had over 30 meetings in 2 days. And it was, actually surprisingly constructive given what we hear about the federal government and the state of affairs there. So I have sort of three takeaways, and one was that this is really a tremendous experience in terms of just forming relationships with our colleagues in other jurisdictions and finding our common ground and speaking sort of from a common place, and that I found that just incredibly helpful in terms of understanding where people are coming from and sort of forming those relationships. The big piece is the meetings that we have, which are both with our federal legislators, so Senators Wyden and Merkley and Representative DeFazio, and with this array of federal agencies. Very surprisingly constructive, and a couple of examples that, Environmental Protection Agency, which has seemed like it was sort of in the target range, very enthusiastic about the work they've done with the city of Eugene on the brownfields, very helpful to us in terms of communications around our riparian zones and the impact of homeless camping there, and some sort of pieces that they have in terms of that conversation. Very kind of interesting conversation with economic development agency and the Commerce Department about some opportunities that they have that they're very excited about, that they think the Northwest should participate in. Health and Human Services didn't really expect a lot. Turned out they had an update on a grant that we've been waiting to hear about, that possibility, and a couple of other funding possibilities that sort of align with how we're looking at law enforcement and homelessness and how we that kind of model. So really constructive. And then the fun coincidence was that at the Department of Transportation, which we also, figured this was a sort of a heavy lift, we wouldn't get a lot of information out of it. The key staffer is a 2012 graduate of the University of Oregon. So when we talked about Franklin Boulevard, he knew exactly what we were talking about. He'd used the BRT. He really got it. So I think, sort of the third takeaway from this is it's not just what we get today or tomorrow. It's the relationships that we're building with those federal agencies, because those staff stay there. Whatever is happening with the administration, the staff stays there. So I think it was a really, really good use of time. I think everybody who went on the trip would have their own anecdotes about why it was valuable to them. So just wanted to give you that report. It was really, really worthwhile. So thank you for bearing with me as I was gone. And now we are ready to do some work. So the first,
one I would want to say, if somebody already didn't say it, sorry I was late, but ballots are due tomorrow.
Right.
And please go out and vote. Personally, I voted yes. So you have to deliver them by hand to one of the many drop boxes. The ballots need to be by tomorrow.
Great. Thank you. And now we are ready to talk about Parks and Rec. Manager, staff.
All right. Thank you, City Manager and Council. My name is Craig Carnegie. I'm with Parks and Open Space Division. Here with Carolyn Burke, our Parks Planning Manager, and Craig Smith, our Recreation Services Director. And we're back for round 2 of your discussion on funding options for parks and recreation facilities. Before we go there, I'd like to ask us to just take a moment and really think about what makes Eugene, Eugene. What do people mean when they talk about Eugene having a high quality of life? I believe most people would say it has as much to do with the beautiful natural setting and our parks and recreation system as anything else. When you ask people this question, they talk about spending time in Hendricks Park, hiking on Spencer's Butte, or biking along our riverfronts. They'll tell you about swimming at Amazon, Sheldon, or Echo Hollow pools, meeting with neighbors at places like Peterson Barn or Campbell Community Center, and playing with friends and family at one of their neighborhood park playgrounds or sports fields. This great infrastructure of parks and recreation facilities both defines the physical character of this community and creates a sense of place. I know I might be biased, but I would contend that this parks and recreation infrastructure is one of Eugene's greatest assets. It not only generates a high quality of life for all residents, young and old, qualities such as health and wellness, clean air and water, but it's also a significant economic driver. It's why people and businesses choose to be here, and many others agree. According to the group Livability, which is a national research company that explores what makes medium-sized cities great places to live, Eugene is in the top tier of their just released 2018 rankings of best places to live in the United States. Their description of why we rank so high starts by stating, quote, "If you crave fresh air and natural beauty, Eugene is the place to be. This beloved college town is full of hiking and biking trails and thick forests throughout the city, along with impressive mountain views," end quote. All of our parks, open spaces, and recreation facilities are reasons Eugene is nicknamed the Emerald City and is such a great place to live, work, and play. Now, on the flip side, I'm sorry for sounding like a broken record because I know we've all heard plenty about the current state of decline occurring to our park infrastructure, including our pools and community centers, probably much more than we'd ever like to hear. But it's important to know because if we don't adequately maintain this infrastructure, we might not only lose a nickname, but lose a number of other highly valued livability factors as well. Which is why today we're presenting you with funding options that will at least slow the decline of park infrastructure, start to make improvements, and build capacity for the future. These options are essentially stopgap measures until we find more ideal long-term and stable solutions. And of course, we will continue to research those long-term stable solutions for you to consider in the future. And now Carolyn will walk us through the details of those funding options, including the city manager's recommendation for action.
We like to start every presentation talking about pie, so tonight is no different. As you recall, this is the image we use to represent the 30-year vision for parks and recreation in our community. And what we're discussing tonight is how we want to implement that vision and what are the first steps that we should take. We met a couple weeks ago and we talked through three different options. We discussed a O&M only option, which would be a 5-year operating levy for operations and maintenance. We discussed a middle option, which would entail a $31 million bond and an associated levy. And finally, the third scenario was a larger $42 million bond and an accompanying levy. Each one of these options would achieve a different percentage of the community's vision and have its own costs associated with it. Tonight, we are here to talk about the city manager staff recommendation, which is the middle scenario, a $31.1 million bond and a $3.1 million levy. This would accomplish 16% of the community vision and would cost the average household approximately $7.25 a month. We have arrived at this recommendation based on 3 years of community engagement, based on the foundational work that this council has done and the subcommittee looking at the different types of funding mechanisms that are available to us, and looking at polling results from a recent voter poll conducted in October. So now I'll describe this recommendation a little bit more. It is comprised of two separate funding measures. One is a $3.1 million 5-year operating and maintenance levy, and the second is a $31.1 million capital bond. These two measures would stand alone on the ballot. They could either both be passed, they could both fail, or one could pass or one could fail. I will note that if a capital bond passes and a levy fails, we would only be able to build some of the projects on that capital list as additional O&M funding became available. And I can describe that a little bit more in an upcoming slide. First, a little bit more about the O&M levy. This would primarily provide additional funding for increased day-to-day maintenance activities. We would see increased maintenance services across the entire park system. This map you see on the screen represents the entire system broken down into developed parks, which are represented in the brighter green, and what we would consider natural area parks, which are in the darker green. In the developed parks, we would see restrooms open that have been closed due to budget shortfalls. Those would be opened at Hendricks Park, Sheldon Youth Sports Park, and Sladden Park. We would see increased trash service so that every single neighborhood park would get daily service during the summer, during our high season. In the off season, we would also see more frequent trash service. We would see more frequent mowing, so the grass will be trimmer, and increased tree maintenance, landscape maintenance, irrigation, lighting, park furnishings, etc. Additionally, we'll be able to have more staff working weekends and after hours. That's when a lot of our parks get used. And so this will help with our rentals over the weekend, keeping restrooms and trash under control. In our natural areas, we will see more frequent trail maintenance. We will also see increased trash service at our high-use trailheads, as well as some additional portable restrooms. We will increase trash service again throughout all of our natural areas and be able to reduce some of the invasive weeds, which really do pose a threat to some of the critical habitats that we manage. Also, we'll be able to monitor and reduce wildfire risks. There are also park safety and security improvements and illicit activity response activities that will increase with two dedicated Eugene Police Department officers dedicated to the park system, as well as two year-round park ambassadors will be able to respond more rapidly to calls for service throughout the entire city, throughout the entire system. But I've also highlighted on this map with the little yellow circles areas where we tend to see higher calls for service, and we will see more increased and rapid response there. Those tend to be along the riverfront park system, along the Amazon corridor, and in some of our more urban parks in the downtown area and closer in. We'll also be able to respond more quickly to illegal camp cleanup, graffiti removal, and vandalism. And finally, the O&M levy will enable us to develop parks in areas that are currently underserved. We'll be able to use existing SDC dollars to build the parks, but the O&M levy will enable us to maintain them. And those parks include Stryker Field, Maddie Reynolds, Santa Clara Community Park, Ferndale, West Bank, and Riverfront Park in the downtown. So now a little bit more information on the capital improvement bond. This funding would allow us to make renovations and improvement throughout the park and rec system. Starting with park renovation projects, represented by the purple asterisks up there. This would include work in Alton Baker Park, University, Tugman, MLK Jr., Berkeley, and Train Song Parks. The next category is trail and habitat projects, represented by the green asterisk, including Amazon Running Trail, completing the bridge, which will complete the looped trail at Delta Ponds, and extending the Ridgeline Trail in Suzanne Arley Park, as well as numerous restoration projects in our priority habitats throughout the city. Safety improvements include improved lighting, represented by the yellow asterisk. These are primarily located throughout the riverfront system and the Amazon corridor, where we have more calls for service related to safety and security. Plus, these are important commuter routes for bicycle transportation. Next is infrastructure projects such as irrigation and restrooms. We'll be working on those throughout the entire city, as well as school district partnerships represented by the orange asterisks. That entails replacing some of the artificial turf at the fields that we co-manage with the school districts, as well as rebuilding the tennis courts at Churchill and looking to expand our community park and community center opportunities in the southwest area. Looking at recreation facility improvements represented by the blue asterisk at Echo Hollow Pool, really fixing some of the deeply infrastructure that is needed to be replaced there, as well as expanding our recreational opportunities for and outdoor swimming, and working at Campbell Community Center to expand our fitness facilities for the seniors who attend that center, and looking at first phase of a sports complex, which has been discussed at Golden Gardens. Again, we have our new park development projects shown on this map. Although these would actually be funded with SDCs instead of through a bond, they would be capital expenditures. So as I noted earlier, some of these capital projects will require additional O&M, and this list includes those projects. And so these are the items where we would need to find those O&M funds before we would actually construct these projects. There are many other projects on the list that can move ahead without that. So, to summarize, we are recommending a $3.1 million 5-year O&M levy, as well as a $31.1 million capital bond. Together, those would cost approximately $7.25 a month. As we mentioned the last time we met, we do anticipate a reduction in people's property tax bills as a result of the 1998 Parks and Recreation bond coming off of the bills in the next 2 years. That would save folks about $2.50 a month, which would be an estimated net monthly cost of $4.75 total. And for that, you can see the capital projects which are identified on this map that includes city wards, as well as the O&M activities citywide. Just a couple words about leveraged funding. The bond amount we are recommending is for $31.1 million, but there are additional funds that can leverage those dollars to actually see an investment of $53.3 million. These are more fully explained in the itemized project list that was in your packet. But you will see where SDCs come into play and where we have partnership funds. We also know that the council has expressed a commitment to finding sustainable ongoing operation and maintenance funding. And so to that end, we recommend that should a resolution move forward to put something on a ballot, that we would include language in that resolution that identifies our commitment to continuing the search for those sustainable funding sources. Additionally, we would be looking at establishing a development coordinator position to assist in the establishment of a private foundation endowment. This is something that everyone, I believe, has expressed is a good idea and something that should move forward. And finally, we know that accountability and transparency is incredibly important and really the standard practice. And so we have a number of steps which we recommend should be put into place should anything go forward. They include separate budget and accounting for a levy, as is required by state law, an annual audit of capital bond expenditures, annual staff summary of spending, an annual review by a citizen advisory board, and an annual city manager's report to city council. So our next steps are to hopefully get some direction tonight, and then we will, depending on what that direction is, be prepared to bring something back to you by February 12th, which is the deadline for referring anything to the May 18 ballot.
Thank you. I do love that closing photo.
Thank you.
Nice choice. So thank you very much. Very helpful and specific. So do I have counselors who need to? Emily? Anybody else? Claire? Anybody else in the queue just yet? Jennifer? Okay. Emily, take it away.
Thank you. This one wouldn't include anything for Sheldon Pool. That would be in a larger one.
That is
And do we have any idea how long Sheldon can limp along?
Well, it's been limping along for almost 50 years, so we'll still maintain it and we'll still keep it open as best we can, you bet. So there's no real answer on when it might not make it. So it's had some renovations piecemeal over the last 30, 40 years.
Great. There's restrooms in other parks that aren't on the list to be reopened, such as Monroe, that has a restroom. So what's happening with those? Or do they need like bond money before they can be opened?
It's just an area that we have kind of had some issues with in terms of vandalism, and they would need to have some operating dollars to basically make some improvements in order for us to open them up permanently. And I think it's something that we could certainly look into in the future. But as of right now, it's the 3 restrooms that we closed as part of the reductions package that we had a couple of years ago.
So is there any room in the bond to make those improvements at those restrooms?
We do have some funding that is in the bond targeted to restrooms, and I think we can determine whether or not it would make sense to invest in those, whether or not we can bring them up to a point where they can be opened.
I want to thank you for all this work. As we've gone through the work sessions, it's really coalesced into a very understandable plan. I like it, and I'm going to vote for the proposal.
Claire.
Thank you. I also thank you for this really hard work and good presentations and all the work you've done bringing us to this point in a thoughtful way. I am a little confused now with this presentation, though. On the slide towards the end, right after the recommendation summary, where you have the 3 drop down. When we talked about this before, I was under the impression that for the middle idea that you're proposing tonight, the total cost for an average household would be about $8. But now I'm learning that that's $8 including what's currently still on the tax rolls from what you said today. Am I interpreting that correctly? So at our last one, the 31 million bond plus O&M levy was total cost per month of approximately $8.
Okay.
And today you're saying it's approximately $725, and I understand it's all estimates,
Right.
minus $250 that's coming off the rolls in the next 2 years as we pay off past bond measures,
Correct.
leaving a net now of $475
Correct.
if we put this recommendation on the ballot.
Correct. And
Okay.
if both pass.
And they both pass. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm asking that is because I had the same questions about Sheldon Pool, because my understanding was that the big package, the 42 million bond plus O&M levy, would include Sheldon Pool, would be approximately $1.50 more per month. I have mine. And so at the last presentation that was presented as $9.50. We had this polling information that said, there was some pretty strong support out in that polling for about $10 a month, and I know that's pushing it. But now I'm thinking, is it really $9.50 minus $2.50, which would be $7 an average?
Yeah, same math.
It probably would.
Okay, so I would be prepared to support the city manager's and staff's proposal, but I would also be prepared to support the higher bond measure based on that math and the polling results that showed their strong support for these measures. If Sheldon Pool is included, we might actually get more support for the bond measures, so I look forward to more discussion with my colleagues about that idea.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, so thanks. Emily and Claire kind of touched on it. I'm wondering what the thought process was behind going with the cheaper option beyond just it's easier to get someone to say yes to lower. I mean,
Councilor Syred is correct in that our polling information did say that voters would go up to approximately $10 a month. However, in talking with the polling firm and our advisors at Trust for Public Land, there was one question that asked kind of how high that threshold would go. And they felt like in order to really be safe going for that higher amount, they would want to have tested that in several different ways. The type of questions that they were focused on were really more in the $6 to $7 per month range, and they felt comfortable with that, but they would not be as comfortable, would not be as conservative to go much higher than that.
Betty, anybody want, before I go second round? Greg, do you have any questions? Okay, Emily, take it away.
Not at this time, Mayor. I've just had to take myself off mute.
Okay.
I'm watching you.
Good. Great.
Time lag.
All right.
I always want more, so I'm not averse to Claire's suggestion. I didn't realize that was good math, thank you. That it would seem more affordable, and I just really have a concern about Sheldon. So if we go with this middle one, and we figure out foundation or a fee to cover operating and maintenance costs, is there another scenario we could use to fix Sheldon in the nearer future? Would you put out a mini bond? I mean, I just don't want to abandon Sheldon. And there may be some other things on the bigger list. It's upstairs that I'd prefer to have, all of it.
I think we can always look at that. Additionally, Sheldon Pool, according to our new SDC methodology, would qualify for system development charge funds. So the total cost of Sheldon renovation, I believe, is about $16 million. So a portion of that could be funded with SDCs, and we can always look at other funding sources in the future. I think that one of the things I guess I would caution us about is even though the number up there says 475, what would actually probably have to be in any voter information is the top number, which is 725. And for a more expensive bond, it would probably be more around 950. So it would, although practically speaking, people may have an offset of that due to their tax bills being lower, that I don't believe we would be able to advertise that in any type of information. So again, just kind of trying to be a little conservative.
So on the total here per year, which is more of interest to me because I pay my property taxes in bigger chunk.
Sure.
It's 87 versus 103. which is only $16, but I know people, once you get over 100, it's going to be, I don't think so. So I really want the bigger one, but I'm more concerned that we have a bigger chance of it not passing. So I think this is the more prudent path.
Claire, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councilor Simple. I do really appreciate you drawing our attention. That's why we have these work sessions, to have these discussions, to that polling data and where the polling firm felt very confident around the data versus things that were a little more mushy. And I think it's very relevant, the fact that we would have to publish in the voters pamphlet what that current rate is and not what the future slightly lower rate will be when those other bond measures come off the tax rolls. So that could be confusing to people and might not garner the support that we're hoping for the measures. So it is a compromise in my mind to let go of the idea of addressing Sheldon Pool right now. It's the challenge we face for having this excellent system that, has really been stretched, and facing the need to look at these ways of starting to refund the system, and so we can see it really be what we have in terms of ideal, and this is one part of the ideal that may need to wait. And then I'm also wondering, though, with our road bond, we were able to realize some savings as we implemented the bond measure, and obviously the expenses at Sheldon Pool are very large. But, there might be potential there for some small pieces, and I'm assuming that just because we don't name Sheldon Pool in the bond measure doesn't mean we couldn't at some point allocate money towards its use. Or I guess that's a question I have.
Well, the project at Sheldon, you got to remember, is both the pool and the community center. And one thing we're striving for there is to really combine them, join them, because they're not. That's why it's such a big project. So, and we are looking at this as a 30-year plan. And so if Sheldon doesn't get the attention it needs this round, then we would certainly be looking at going back out sometime in the future to look at it and other recreation facilities. The challenge with recreation facilities is that they are so expensive to renovate. So we have River House Community Center and Peterson Barn Community Center also on the list that didn't quite make it within this $30 million at this time.
And then to the question of if we realize savings in one project, can it be spent within the system?
Twyla, do you want to speak to that? As I understand it, and we can clarify this, but with our bond counsel. But my understanding is for the capital projects, we have to stay within the list that we.
Correct. I believe we can verify that with council, but I believe that if we have a list attached to the measure and the resolution, that we would be tied to those projects. But we can.
On the bond measure, and would that apply to the levy as well?
The levy would be for O&M, so.
Right. Well, I'm assuming Sheldon has some O&M. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So I've got Jennifer, and then you can come back. Oh, and Alan. Jennifer, Alan, and then, or Alan, Jennifer. I don't care which way you go. Go for it.
So Echo Hollow pool renovation is about $10.5 million. And Sheldon, what was Sheldon's $16 million project for both the community center and the pool?
Correct.
So if the pool, what's the pool renovation portion of that?
Oh, I'd have to look at the numbers exactly. It's a little bit more than half. It's
8 to 9-ish.
But it's hard to do because we're literally joining the lobby, so we're actually building both faces outward. So.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there isn't a way to renovate the pool and the lobby and then have the community center be a future project that would be another $8 million or whatever down the road. And then adding only $8 million doesn't add that much money to this bond. And I would like to know what that would look like if you can do it, and how much it would add to the 725.
Yeah, we'd have to get back on that rough number. But we're taking care of the deficiencies within the building first, the real hard streetscape issues and before we renovate. So, and I know the community center itself has a branch library built into a plan. So I guess in that part of it, it would be scalable as far as what we did progressively. So.
Yeah, I was disappointed there wasn't more pools in this because we're severely underpooled in this community, and I swim at Sheldon Pool, so it really does need some help. And it would, I think, getting us to yes, adding the Sheldon Pool in there helps us get there to yes, especially if it doesn't add that much to it. If it stays within, I thought we were in that $8 range, and if by adding just the renovation of the pool in there and we're still in that $8 range, I think that might be something that's actually very doable. It still fits within what the survey said that was available or people would support.
Okay, Jennifer.
Yeah, so I have a map question. So on this map, there's a little white asterisk for repairing and improving restrooms and irrigation, but there are no white asterisks on the map. So I assume that those were supposed to be the Sheldon, Sladden, Hendricks. Were they supposed to be on there somewhere, or are they like invisible? Or
The Sheldon is not shown on this map because that wasn't part of the recommendation.
Oh no, the one for the bathrooms.
Oh,
The white one.
I'm
It's
sorry.
on the very bottom under the yellow one.
That's because we'll be making repairs throughout all of our restrooms, so plumbing, replacing roofs, same with our irrigation systems, and we haven't necessarily mapped where every single one of those are, but it's kind of system-wide.
Oh, okay. I just thought it might kind of help. My area is very empty. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but I thought maybe if we pointed out the fact that the Sheldon restrooms, which were before, are heavily used because of the tennis courts and the track, and
Yes.
people might look forward to that
Yes.
as part of this. And
Yeah.
so maybe we could think about sticking that in there.
Absolutely. We could map where some of those restroom improvements would be, and Sheldon would be one of those that would be reopened as a result.
Okay.
Emily, one more?
How would it delay us if we wanted the figures to do what Alan's saying and put money? Because that's sort of a middle compromise between the compromise and the whole pie.
What would be helpful for us is when we come back next, what we would like to do is come back with a resolution, or it could be two different resolutions that you can take action on. And so if one of those resolutions would include exactly what you talked about, it'd be helpful for the council, a majority, if they said yes to that, we would come back with that resolution for your potential action. If you wanted another one, or if that was the only one, then whatever resolutions you want us to come back with would be important for us to know tonight.
So could we ask you that and say, this one is option A, we're really liking it, and how much more would we have to pay
Yes.
for option B?
Yes.
And then we could choose which one at that point?
Yes.
I think that's really cool. My other question was, if we decide to go with what we've got going right now, and you can't use it for anything except what's on the list, can you put it at the bottom of the list and say if there's any money left over, it'll go there?
I think so. I think it just depends how we write it. And so if we're looking for flexibility, we will work to achieve that type of flexibility.
That was one of the stumbling blocks, is if it's not on the list, we can't use extra money. So can we have a maybe list?
And we'll talk to our bond counsel specific for the capital bonds. We run all of the stuff through our bond counsel. So we will ask that specific question, both if it's not on there, are we prohibited? And also, then can we add if there's anything extra? So we'll ask both of those questions.
Thank you. I would really like to have that info and the choice of the two measures.
So the choice of the two measures, just so I'm clear, one is what you have just proposed now, and the other would add just the $8 million for the Sheldon pool.
Or whatever that cost is.
Or whatever the pool
area.
cost is. Okay, those are the two choices.
O&M too?
I think we would want to ensure that O&M would then wrap itself into the levy, so that we want to take account of that also.
It might go up a little.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Alan and then Jennifer.
Is it proportional? So if you add $9 million to 31 40.1 million, you get 40.1 million. Then the 385 goes up to 490.
It's probably fairly proportional. We can work on those numbers.
Yeah. Because that still makes it under $5. Plus 340 plus 840.
Okay, Betty, you want to?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Greg, Betty, and then you.
Do we need to pass a motion tonight then?
But what we need tonight is some pretty definitive guidance. You're not.
We don't need to pass this motion we have if we're thinking of doing something different, right?
What we would like is for council to actually vote on the resolutions that you would like to have come back to you at the next meeting before the 12th.
Okay, so we don't have to pass a particular value tonight. And my other question is, what value home are you talking about when you say how much it would cost?
Well, what's the average?
$1 million or 500,000 or?
So we use the median home value provided by the assessor's office. So it's I think it was about $270,000, somewhere in that range. But we tied to the median home value by the line assessor.
That it?
That's all.
Greg?
Can I just clarify go ahead. I'll clarify in a minute.
Greg?
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I don't want to go too granular in this, but in that $8 million, $9 million range, in terms of repair and replacement for infrastructure with Sheldon Pool, what exactly will that get us? Will that get us to the point in the pool where, structurally it will be sound enough for X amount of years or Y amount of years? And then looking at later, working on the community center portion?
Oh, I can say that the first thing we do is take care of any of the deficiencies in the building, the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical, the energy systems. And then we'd have to look at the tanks. And at Sheldon, we'd probably put in another tank for fitness and another recreational amenity in it, and probably a sauna or something. The larger tank, the 6-lane, 25-meter, would probably be similar, the same, or stay the same. Is that specific enough for you?
Yeah, that kind of helps me because what wasn't, if I remember correctly from an earlier presentation, wasn't Sheldon and Echo Hollow at about the same level as about a C, D-rated pool right now structurally?
Echo was slightly worse off than Sheldon. It hadn't had the deficiencies. Yeah. So Sheldon was a little bit better off than Echo as far as those deficiencies goes. It did have a seismic roof upgrade and the water piping system replaced in the last 5 years.
Okay. But still, it's in the same general ballpark as Echo Hollow.
Roughly.
Just a little better. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
All right. Manager, did you have a clarification?
No, I'm fine. I think Catherine's working through the proposed motion.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Jennifer, sorry.
Yes, so I would love to see something done at Sheldon, but I'm wondering from your guys' perspective, would doing it like part and then part later, would there be some problems with that? Or things that, reasons why we wouldn't want to do that?
No, I don't see any immediately why we wouldn't want to do that. It would just put a newer building next to an older one in the sense of
sometimes when you're redoing things, you want to do it all at once.
I think the key point would come into where that is connected to make some more efficiencies, and so we'd really look after what we're serving the swimmers versus what makes the whole complex an easier flow and more efficiently operated complex. So that would be the key point.
I think you want to renovate the old building sooner.
I know. That's right. It'll make all the daycare kids jealous.
Okay, Claire.
But it sounds from what you're talking about that if we did go with this second alternative of a slightly larger measure to do some immediate work at Sheldon, then the larger question of a remodel for connecting the two lobbies could be deferred while some needed maintenance could be done in the meantime.
I would assume, yes, you could plan to create a master plan that did connect it with a new lobby, both buildings, but then not build that part out, but then build phase 1 and then phase 2 later. Yes, I'm pretty confident that could happen.
That's great. So are we ready, Betty? You have language for a couple of resolutions here?
I think so.
Am I the official second since I'm the senior?
I guess so.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. I move to direct the city manager to prepare 2 options for council action. A resolution to refer 2 measures to Eugene voters on the May 2018 ballot. First, a $3.12 million operations and maintenance levy to maintain park trails, natural areas, rivers, and recreation facilities, including increased security patrol, and the second, a $31.1 million capital funding bond measure package to improve park trails, natural areas, community centers, and parks. And a second option for including the Sheldon Pool in the capital bond and the O&M.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All in favor? 1, 2,
Aye.
4, 5, 6. Thank you, and 6, and no opposition, so it passes. Thank you very much. Look forward to taking the next step.
Didn't ask for enough, I guess.
Thanks for the attorney for being so efficient.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for keeping us moving.
trying to give you more money?
Okay, our
Whatever happened on my.
next order of business is to go into executive session. Eugene City Council will now meet in executive session held pursuant to ORS 192.6602E and ORS 192.6602H to discuss the negotiation of a real property transaction and to consult with legal counsel regarding current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we may return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. And I guess I'm waiting for Knox.